Video games are often praised as the only interactive medium. To clarify, other mediums of entertainment might provide interactivity solely for the creator of a product and not to the consumer. To give an example, cooking might be considered an interactive medium since the chef has many ways to express themselves when cooking the same dish, but the same couldn't be said of the person eating the dish. In this example, the chef would be a game developer and not the person playing the game. Most, if not all, mediums provide interactivity to the creators of their products, when video games might be the only medium that provides interactivity to the consumer as well. Video games have been highly interactive since their inception, but for some reason, a certain type of interactivity always drew players who seek to leave their mark, even when said games counterintuitively were, strictly speaking, less interactive. The games I'm talking about are narrative-driven, multiple-choice games, like Telltale, Life is Strange, and Detroit Become Human. By less interactive, I mean that, technically speaking, a playthrough of Detroit Become Human has a lot less options to choose from per minute, and orders of magnitude less final outcomes than an average game of Gang Beast or chess. The key difference, of course, being that each choice you make in Detroit is a lot more impactful than choosing between momentarily moving left or right in an action game, or even more impactful than some chess moves. In this video, I'd like to propose a way of thinking and categorizing the types of choices made in narrative-driven games of this sort, in games which provide you predefined choices for pre-made scenarios. I'll present my theory and then come back to define more accurately what type of choices I'm talking about. My theory is that every choice is either an active or a passive choice. Passive choices are most of the narrative choices you think about when talking about choices in video games, including mainly the infamous dialogue options. To define, passive choices are choices which the game presents to you clearly and asks you to make a choice. The flow of time usually stops and wouldn't continue until you make a choice that usually branches out in the narrative in a different direction. Active choices are choices that can be made and affect the narrative just the same, but are communicated to the player differently. Instead of being presented openly to the player as dialogue options or some other select screen, active choices are baked into the game's mechanics and systems. The game never tells the player directly that he has the option to make an active choice, but instead, the game will react to the player when he uses the game's language in order to speak his mind. That was a little abstract, so let me give a theoretical example. Let's say that you make a game where the only thing you can do is shoot, a basic first-person shooter. Now you are on a mission to go to a cell and kill a prisoner that is on death row. You walked into the cell and now it's you and the prisoner, let's call him Jeff, and behind you a locked door. Since the only thing you can do is shoot, to interact with the door in this game, you need to shoot a button next to it in order to open and close it. Now, some NPC might tell you that your mission is to kill Jeff, but the game actually silently proposed a different ending to the interaction. If you're so inclined, instead of shooting Jeff, you can shoot the door open and just walk out, leaving it open and helping Jeff escape. No one ever explicitly told you that this is an option, but as the player, you used whatever tools were available to express your say in the matter, and the game was ready to receive your opinion. That is what I would call an active choice. Some examples of active choices include Dishonored's method of sparing enemies. To spare a target, you must perform a non-lethal takedown, the same as you would against any other enemy, instead of choosing a kill spare option. Another example would be some of the intertwined NPC quest lines in Dark Souls 3. Sometimes some NPC might say that he doesn't like some other NPC in Firelink, and you'll have the option to dispose of said character to pursue his questline instead of the other. A final and more simple example is the songwriting in Doki Doki Literature Club. There are four girls that a player can try to get close to, and the main way to choose between them is by creating a song that they like. Songwriting is done in the most basic way imaginable. You simply select words from a list, and each word is related to a different character. The system is only a single step away from being a passive choice, like the rest of the game, but this simple change elevates the otherwise stupid minigame into something that pulls you into the game world and puts you into the main character's shoes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Some other examples land somewhere in between the two types. I could go on and try to redefine them more accurately, but instead of splitting hairs, allow me to transform my binary theory into a spectrum. After all, everything can be looked at as a spectrum, or a graph. So at the passive side of the spectrum, we have classic dialog options. On the active side, we have Jeff and some of the other examples I laid out, while Doki Doki is a bit further in, it's debatable. The only extra definition that I will apply on this whole spectrum is that it includes only choices that are pre-made and implemented by the developer, and not decisions that are generated by systems. Predefined actions that lead to predefined outcomes. A diverse Pokemon team doesn't count, but building a Pokemon team that includes a Piloswine specifically, and then fighting Svetlana, which used to have a pet Piloswine when she grew up, leading her to forfeit the fight, making it a specific interaction, does count. When trying to implement active choices, there are two main drawbacks that exist almost by definition. The first one is that it's really hard to communicate to the player that the choice is available. Most active choices are almost considered Easter eggs, as finding out they are available is rare. It's obviously something that the developer can work on and improve, but they will never be as clear as dialog options that are represented on screen. The second drawback is that the repeating existence of active choices within a game is an important promise from the developer to the player, but a hard promise to keep. To elaborate, one of the ways to address the previous drawback is to continuously offer players active choices in every interaction, so when he eventually catches on, he'll be aware from now on that the option exists and will seek them out. Once the developer made the promise by providing two or three consecutive active choices, now the player will always accept their actions to be answered and recognized by the game. But in order to do that, the developer must foresee how the player will try to express their choice and implement a choice that way. The problem is that if the player uses their normal mechanics in order to express their opinion, they can do it all the time, and not just when an active choice is available. They obviously won't expect much to happen when shooting at a wall, but the same player who is sent to kill Jeff might try to save him by shooting the NPC that delivered the quest, when the developer didn't foresee this option, and thus nothing will happen and the player will be left dissatisfied. That being said, in my book, active choices are almost always worth the risk, as they bring so much more to the table. An active choice done right challenges the way the player perceives the game world and its systems and mechanics, and demands him to treat it more as a living world rather than a collection of abstract systems. Active choices create in-game simulations for how real-world equivalents of these situations will play out, and how making a decision would work. In real life, when someone has to make a hard decision, they don't usually turn abruptly to you and then bluntly follow your opinion. Instead, they act out according to their own accord, and they change their mind for your benefit only if you use your own power to persuade them. In contrast, passive choices force you to acknowledge yourself as an onlooker on the game, as someone separate from this world that pulls the strings from outside. Telltale style games are basically just a choose your own adventure book. They offer interactivity for sure, interactivity that's impressive for a book, but with games we can do so much more. I will try to illustrate why I put active choices in such high regard using examples from Undertale. I'm going to spoil some major parts of the game, so please skip to this timestamp if you want to avoid spoilers, including subsequent playthroughs. In Undertale, you have an option to spare enemies in combat encounters. Since the option is laid bare, it's somewhere around here, only a little bit to the left, since it's kind of contextualized as a combat option and not as a story option. The active choices come into play when you try to spare bosses. In Undertale, every single character or enemy can be either killed or spared. You can finish the game without killing a single being, or kill every last monster, including all characters. Some of the bosses are friendly characters that can be spared easily by just not attacking them and following their minigames, but some other bosses that are more dead set on killing you won't let you spare them or run away. With these bosses, if you'd like to stop fighting and convince them to make peace, you have to use your tools and mechanics the game gives you in order to express that. With your caretaker that suffers from remorse, you need to choose spare around 16 times until you get a new dialogue and she eventually agrees. From Undyne, you need to run away and effectively continue your fight in the overworld while she chases you. To spare Mettaton, you need to understand his reality show minigame, something that I, on my first playthrough, didn't think was anything more than a random visual flavor, and play that alongside the normal combat. These situations force you to try and understand the characters in order to choose the optimal way to approach sparing them, instead of just looking at their health bar and damage values like you would in most other RPGs. As a final note, I will try to step one meta step backwards from the topic and try to explain again why I think this point is so crucial, using a more generalized argument. One of the values I value the most in all media is the product's ability to make the consumer relate to a character. Simply put, when I watch a movie that features a main character, I want to feel as close as I can to that character. Movies are, of course, pretty limited when it comes to actual experiences. They can't actually put me in a battle scene fighting alongside a character, but they can make me feel emotions. Generally, if the character on screen is feeling some strong emotion that I'm not feeling, that's a miss in my book. The same can be said for video games. If my character is about to die, and dying is a big deal to this character, but as the player, I respond without losing any progress, I won't feel any tension, and thus I won't relate to my character. Active choices are an effective tool to make me relate strongly to my character, since it puts me in its shoes, instead of pulling me out.